Cambridge Insider podcast time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of our podcast. It's great to have you all listening. It's great to have you all tuned in. Mr. Craig Batson, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. It is officially spring, I believe. We have gone forward. It's in that time of year in Washington and many other parts of the country where it's like jacket, rain jacket, bikini, next day sweater. It's just different weather every day, and it's kind of fun, So hey, that's what we're doing here, and it makes me happy.
All right, I'd love to just continue listening to you describe the weather, but we actually do have a jam-packed episode, so let's get straight into it. Really, the theme of today's episode is to just to give our listeners a little bit of an information update. A lot happening in the market, lots happening in the industry. And then, as always, providing you with some strategies and some solutions from Cambridge's side. So, Mr. Batson, you sent through a very interesting article that I was completely unaware of this. But talk to me a little bit about the article and that idea of learning loss. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so learning loss, I think, is a big buzzword. I know executive producer Dean talks about it a lot. A lot of our school officials talk about it. So learning loss is generally viewed as learning that is lost over the summer because we have this extended break and people kind of students backslide on what they've learned. And that has now been expanded and studied extensively in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, understandably, some schools had to shut down for times. They had to work to transition to online, and then we're still doing it online. So CREDO, which is the Center for Education, Center for Research on Education Outcomes. This is at Stanford University that released this study, and it's going to be in our show notes. But they released some big studies, and this was something they did across 17 states, and they estimated how many days of learning were lost due to the pandemic. And so this was studied, and they found that on average, students lost in spring 2020 between 57 to 183 days of learning and reading, and from 136 to 232 days of learning in math. Wow.
Yeah, that was going to be my response as well. That's a significant, that's a significant portion of time. I do also just want to get back. You said Stanford.
Yeah.
So this is really up there type of research. What is this? I mean, the concept is fine and we understand it. What does this mean for schools? Why are we talking about this on our podcast?
Yeah, I think this is important because, look, we're an international education podcast and we talk about the struggles that international students have been having as well. But I think it's important to highlight that domestic students are having these troubles too. And one of the great things that Cambridge Network has done in the pandemic and over the past couple of years is expand our, academic center, our learning coaches. We've had our lovely colleague Sarah Guo on to talk about everything that goes into the tutoring that they offer. And this is an area where we have been working on making sure that our international students are supported and not experiencing this type of learning loss. And this is a great time to look at it and say, hey, maybe my domestic students, need these options as well. And our learning center, our learning coaches are available for domestic students as well.
Yeah, it's important to note that. I mean, we've had over the past several months, I would say, school partners reaching out, and this being front and center as part of the conversation, saying that, students, both domestic and international, are struggling because, of the online model, which just doesn't give you that interaction. It doesn't give you that sense of the traditional learning models that we're used to. Time differences is, of course, one big one for our international students. Recorded classes, the fact that many curriculums have had to be shortened and to be able to fit them into this new online model. So, this is important stuff, and schools recognizing that because of this learning loss that has occurred, they need to be providing a service both to their international students, of course, but even so to their domestic kids. Why should, why Cambridge's tutoring service? This is something that, people think of Cambridge Network, they think international education, they think the international population. What makes our tutoring service and offering something that schools should be considering?
So I think this is a great question, right? We created our tutoring service, which is called Creative K-12, in order to support students that were struggling. And this was something that we noticed is we would have a student struggling and there would be no one to help them. And, they would maybe, okay, what about if we get an upperclassman to tutor them? Or, well, let's search online to find a tutor. And that had mixed results. So finally we said, no, we'll handle this. And Sarah created and launched this branch of Cambridge Network. And what they focus on is personalized tutoring with experts leading the way.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned it briefly there. I think the model for some time has been a college student giving some tutoring after a class, and that's all good and well. I think that the concern there comes is what's the quality that we're providing with our students, specifically in a pandemic where this is a serious issue. And one of the things that I've spoken in length and in depth with school officials about is the need to get a tutoring service that is objective. Oftentimes students, both domestic and international, will say to a school, okay, I've got a tutor. My mom knows somebody or my family knows somebody. I've got a tutor. I am going to tutoring. And that's the end. That's where the school's conversation ends. And it's almost a little bit of a subjective process. We don't really know the quality. We don't get kept in the loop as the school. There aren't reports that are submitted both to schools and parents. The great thing with this type of tutoring is it's this third-party service. So it really is an expert tutoring service that allows schools to be receiving constant feedback. Is this working for the kid? Checking in with classroom teachers. What specifically do they need to be focusing on? How do we need to customize this? Where do we need to be flexible to continue helping the student grow moving forward? Also understanding that ultimately we don't want to be giving tutoring to any student forever. We really want to see it as a solution. And the only way you do that is by offering great service, but then also being able to check in with the family to say, or teachers to be able to say, is this something that's working? Do we need to continue giving it in these, courses, or can we change course a little bit, I suppose?
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the Creative K-12 promise of they release reports to the family after every session. They are willing to engage with the students' teachers to make sure that they are getting the correct information, they are doing it. And in order to have this success and have this strong program, they are not the cheapest tutoring service out there. And I think that's very important to note, right? Our listeners mostly run independent schools, and parents send their kids to your schools because you're the best schools in your area, your neighborhood, your state, your county. And we need to give them the best tutors that they offer. And that's what Creative K-12 does. Your first lesson is always free. It happens every time. We have partnership opportunities that we can reach out to you and say, hey, maybe we offer a discount for your student in exchange for some promotion. All that is on the table, and something that is going to be very important as we deal with this learning loss. I know all of our California schools are starting to go back to in-person learning. Washington schools are going back to in-person learning, and we are going to find out how well online learning worked for some kids. And it's going to work very well for some and not as well for others.
Absolutely. We'll have executive producer Dean post a lot of these details on our show notes, but feel free to reach out to your Cambridge representative if you want more information on the Creative K-12 tutoring. Again, thinking about this as an option to support both your domestic and your international kids. We're talking subject-based experts. We're talking customizable programs, and ultimately we're talking about supporting kids, and that's the most important thing. Mr. Batson, anything further on learning loss, tutoring, and support before we move on?
I think the last thing is just, hey, reach out before you see that F on the kid's grade report. maybe you see some poor test results. Maybe, you let your teachers know that this is an option, and say, like, look, this is what we're going to be recommending to our students. And if they're struggling, let us know who's struggling. I think that's the most important thing.
And last thought is, I'm 90% sure, just from conversations that I've had with teachers, that teachers would very much welcome an authentic tutoring support service that they know their students are getting looked after in. So again, reach out. All right, let's move on. Phase 2 of this podcast. You haven't heard me say that before. That's the type of response that I'm looking for from you. Phase 2, speak to me a little bit about, we've just received the newest number from SEVIS and the USCIS in terms of students coming into the country. We pride ourselves on being front and center, giving you the most up-to-date information. Mr. Batson, what are these numbers saying?
Well, and I think I just want to cash at this, that, look, we know these numbers in our hearts, and we have talked about them unofficially, and we have, discussed this and talked about all the different things and looking at enhancing your marketing. But SEVIS just released their, this one's an annual report, so at least they released that one on time. We should expect in the new administration, we'll be getting more regular updates. But this report covers 2020, and it shows exactly what we knew was coming. I'm just going to go over some of the top line numbers. All 4 regions of the United States saw a decrease in students enrolled kindergarten through grade 12 in the international year. We are seeing 19.4% decrease in the Northeast, 17% decrease in the Midwest, 16% decrease in the South, and 16% decrease in the West. So these are big drops in about what we were expecting to see in the calendar year.
Okay. All right. So yes, we've expected this. It's something that we've been quoting other articles getting to this number, but we sort of knew this all along. I think it's important for all of our listeners to remember that this is an update on the newest numbers that have just been published, something that we knew all along, but going back to what we've said in probably close to 10 podcast episodes up until this point, and the real messaging from Cambridge Network is there's a drop in student numbers. It's incredibly competitive. What are you doing as an international program to change the narrative? And there's numerous things that you can do. Everything from, making yourself a little bit more value driven in terms of the services that you present to kids, to looking at what your price point is, to ultimately really taking this by the scruff of the neck in terms of our Cambridge enhanced marketing, and making sure that you're getting your word of your school and your international program out there on the right platforms. But understanding that as a school, if you continue to just plod along, things are very unlikely to change. It's very competitive. There are opportunities, but you do need to be strategizing. You need to be sitting with your agency partners and thinking about what is the next step. How do I continue to grow my international program and make sure that I can continue to receive these great students that are, adding to the diversity of my school programs?
So I agree with all of that. And that's the takeaway, right? And I don't want to sit here and just read this report, but I am going to do that a couple of times in case our school officials don't have time to go find it. So this is the part specifically on international students at K through 12 schools. 59,111 international students for K-12 schools during the calendar year of 2020. I think that's very important to know. This is not a high number of students. I mean, that's just over 1,000 students in each state if it was divided equally, and we know it wasn't. 44% of those students were from China. So over 25,000 of the students were from China. South Korea, 9% of the students at 5,000 students. Vietnam, 7.5% of the students at 4,400 students. Those are the biggest players. Mexico and Canada round out the top 5 that are under 5% each. So we are looking at an incredibly competitive market. And then in addition to looking at what schools dropped out of the international student game, only a 3% decrease. So we're seeing a 20% decrease in students, but a 3% decrease in schools. And so that is the takeaway, is what are you doing to make your program stand out in this hyper-competitive environment.
Absolutely. And I know this is a time of year. I've spoken with a lot of school officials as they start planning for the sort of fall enrollment season. They're in the middle of that right now, and then planning together, for fall 2022 and beyond. So, if you're crunching numbers, if you're looking at budgets, these are the conversations you need to be having right now. Reach out to your Cambridge Network program manager. let them guide you through what can be done to take this challenge head on. Mr. Craig Batson, anything else that catches your eye as you scroll through that article?
No. I mean, it's fascinating, right? I hope listen, if you are taking the time to listen to the Cambridge Insider podcast, which I think everybody should every week because it's very, informative. But, sit down, look at this report. It has some major takeaways. We give you the top line information, but it really does, talk about the number of students that are enrolled in big schools, the number of students that are, the top schools. Like, I don't know, this one's fascinating to me. Northeastern University is the most populous F1 visa program in the United States at 17,000 students, followed by New York University at 16,000. I mean, these numbers are just fascinating to people that are interested in international education.
Absolutely. What we'll do is we'll have executive producer Dean post that article up for us as well on the show notes. And again, if you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, reach out to the podcast team. Share the podcast. Reach out with some questions. If you have some comments, leave them there. It'll be well received, and certainly something that we can look into if you do have any suggestions. Mr. Batson, good episode outlining a little bit of some of the challenges that we're facing both domestically with some of the struggles of this pandemic year of learning that we've come full circle 12 months now, and then just in general on the international education industry and market as it stands. Any final thoughts from your side that you want to share before we say goodbye?
Let's just keep the positive energy going. I was down a couple of weeks ago, but we gotta ride through this year. We're gonna see it. We're gonna see this industry come back stronger than ever because maybe it'll look different, but I believe in international education. That's somebody that's worked in it in a long time, and so it will always be here. It's just what's it gonna look like?
Exactly. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Adapt or die. There are things that we can do, and we should be doing them. Reach out. Let us know if you want to chat, and we'll see you around the next episode of the Cambridge Insider Podcast. Bye bye, everybody.